For 30 long years, a truth so explosive that it could tear apart the very foundation of the Forrester and Logan families has remained buried beneath layers of guilt, fear, and desperate silence. But now that truth has finally clawed its way into the light, shattering lives and rewriting history forever, as Brooke Logan stands trembling in front of the man she loves and delivers a confession that changes everything. Hope Logan is not who Ridge Forrester believed. She was not the innocent product of a complicated past, but the hidden legacy of a forbidden love, the daughter of Deacon Sharp, a secret Brooke has guarded since before Hope ever took her first breath. And when Brooke finally whispers the words she has rehearsed in her nightmares for decades, Ridge's world collapses in a single, devastating moment. It all begins on what should have been an ordinary evening at the Forrester mansion, the kind of night Ridge thought he understood, surrounded by familiar faces and old memories, yet an uneasy tension hangs in the air as Brooke grows increasingly distracted, her hands shaking, her voice faltering whenever Hope's name is mentioned. And Ridge senses it immediately because after decades of loving Brooke, he knows when something is terribly wrong. He presses her gently at first, asking if she's overwhelmed, if something at Forrester Creations is bothering her, but Brooke's eyes fill with tears, and in that instant Ridge realizes this is far bigger than business, far deeper than another family argument, because this is the look of a woman standing at the edge of a truth that could destroy everything she holds dear. As the room empties and the echoes of laughter fade, Brooke finally breaks, her voice cracking as she tells Ridge there's something he deserves to know, something she should have told him years ago, something she has no right to keep hidden any longer, and Ridge, though unprepared for what's coming, braces himself, never imagining the magnitude of what he's about to hear. Brooke begins by taking Ridge back 3 decades, to a time of confusion and loneliness, to a moment when her life felt untethered and she made a choice that would haunt her forever. And as she speaks, flashes of the past flood Ridge's mind, memories of early days with Brooke, of Deacon's presence in their lives, of moments that never quite made sense but were brushed aside because love demanded trust. Brooke confesses that during a brief, secret, emotionally charged relationship with Deacon Sharp, she became pregnant and consumed by fear of judgment, rejection, and losing everything. She made the most painful decision of her life, to hide the truth about Hope's paternity and raise her as her own without ever revealing who her real father was. When Brooke finally says the words aloud, when she admits that Hope is Deacon's daughter, Ridge feels as though the ground beneath him has vanished, his heart pounding, his breath stolen as decades of memories suddenly rearrange themselves into a horrifying new picture. Every smile, every argument, every moment he spent believing he understood Brooke and her past now feels like a lie, and Ridge's shock quickly turns to disbelief, then anger, and finally a deep, aching betrayal that cuts deeper than anything he's ever known. He demands to know how she could keep something like this from him, how she could let him love Hope, protect Hope, fight for Hope, without ever knowing the truth of who she really was. And Brooke, sobbing uncontrollably, admits she was terrified of losing Ridge, terrified of destroying her family, terrified of the consequences if Deacon's name were ever attached to Hope's life. As Ridge paces the room, his fury rising, he realizes that this secret doesn't just affect him and Brooke. It changes everything for Hope, for Deacon, for the entire family, and he struggles to reconcile the Hope he knows with the truth Brooke has just revealed. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to them, the ripple effects of Brooke's confession begin spreading through the family like wildfire, as Hope herself senses something is wrong, noticing the way her mother avoids her gaze, the way Ridge suddenly looks at her with a mixture of confusion and pain, and when Hope finally confronts Brooke, demanding answers, Brooke knows there is no more running, no more hiding. In a raw, emotional moment that leaves both mother and daughter shattered, Brooke tells Hope the truth about her biological father, and Hope's reaction is one of pure devastation, her identity unraveling as she struggles to process the revelation that the man she's known as Deacon Sharp is not just a complicated figure from her past, but her real father, a truth that redefines every interaction, every memory, and every feeling she's ever had toward him. Hope feels betrayed, not only by her mother, but by the silence that surrounded her entire life. And as she grapples with anger, confusion, and heartbreak, she begins to question who she really is and whether anything she believed about her family was ever real. Deacon, when he finally learns the truth, is equally stunned, overwhelmed by guilt for the years he lost and the daughter he never knew he had. And his emotional reaction adds yet another layer of chaos to an already volatile situation as he wrestles with regret, longing, and a desperate desire to be part of Hope's life despite knowing how much damage his presence could cause. Ridge, however, finds himself unable to see past the betrayal, his trust in Brooke completely shattered as he confronts the reality that the woman he loved lied to him for 30 years, robbing him of the chance to make his own choices and manipulating the very foundation of their family. And as his anger boils over, Ridge questions whether their relationship can survive such a monumental deception. The fallout intensifies as the rest of the family begins to learn the truth, reactions ranging from shock to outrage to reluctant understanding, and old wounds are ripped open as past conflicts resurface with renewed intensity, forcing everyone involved to confront their own roles in enabling silence and secrecy. Brooke, consumed by guilt and regret, begs for forgiveness, insisting she acted out of fear and love, believing she was protecting Hope. But Ridge counters that love built on lies is no love at all, and his words cut deeper than any accusation. As Hope tries to navigate her new reality, she finds herself torn between the mother who raised her and the father she never knew, struggling to balance compassion with anger, curiosity with caution, and her journey becomes one of painful self-discovery as she seeks to understand where she comes from and what that means for her future. The revelation also threatens to alter alliances and relationships across the canvas, reigniting long-standing rivalries and forcing characters to choose sides as the consequences of Brooke's confession continue to unfold. Ridge's internal conflict grows as he battles lingering love for Brooke against the overwhelming sense of betrayal, and though he tries to remain strong, cracks begin to show as he realizes how deeply this secret has scarred everyone involved, including himself. In the end, the exposure of this 30-year secret becomes more than just a shocking revelation. It becomes a reckoning, a moment that forces every character to confront uncomfortable truths about love, trust, and the cost of silence, leaving no relationship untouched and no future certain. As the dust settles, one thing becomes painfully clear. Nothing will ever be the same again, because the truth once revealed cannot be undone, and the echoes of Brooke's confession will continue to haunt the Forrester and Logan families for years to come, proving that some secrets, no matter how well hidden, are destined to destroy everything in their path when they finally come to light. As the devastating truth continues to reverberate through every corner of their lives, the emotional aftershocks only grow more intense, stretching far beyond that first night of confession and sinking deeper into the hearts of everyone involved. Because a secret carried for 30 years does not simply end when spoken aloud. It mutates, it spreads, and it forces consequences that no one can escape. In the days following Brooke's admission, Ridge finds himself haunted by memories he can no longer trust. Moments that once felt pure now poisoned by doubt as he replays conversations, decisions, and sacrifices he made for Hope, questioning whether he was acting as a loving father figure or unknowingly living inside a carefully constructed illusion. Every time he looks at Hope, he sees Deacon's shadow looming between them, and though he tries to hide it, the distance is undeniable, a silent reminder of how deeply Brooke's lie has fractured the bond they once shared. Brooke, meanwhile, spirals under the weight of her own guilt, replaying the moment she chose silence over honesty, convincing herself she was protecting her daughter while slowly realizing that protection built on deception has exacted a far greater cost than the truth ever could have. She tries desperately to repair the damage, reaching out to Ridge with tearful apologies, insisting that her love for him was real, that every emotion they shared was genuine. But Ridge struggles to hear her words over the roar of betrayal echoing in his mind, because what hurts the most is not just that she lied, but that she believed she had the right to decide what he could handle and what he deserved to know. Hope's journey becomes even more painful as she attempts to make sense of her new identity, oscillating between anger at her mother and a reluctant curiosity about the father she never truly knew. And when she finally confronts Deacon face to face, the moment is charged with raw emotion, decades of lost time hanging heavy between them as Deacon struggles to articulate his remorse, his voice cracking as he admits he would have done anything differently had he known, had he been given the chance to be her father from the beginning. Hope listens, torn between compassion and resentment, aware that while Deacon didn't choose the lie, his past actions still shaped the man he became, and she wonders whether embracing him now would heal her or only complicate an already fragile sense of self. The family dynamic continues to unravel as news of the secret spreads, triggering fierce reactions and long-simmering resentments, with some accusing Brooke of selfishness and manipulation while others quietly acknowledge the impossible position she was in. Caught between fear and love in a world that has never been forgiving to women who make mistakes. Ridge's anger intensifies when he realizes how many people were indirectly affected by the lie. How decisions about business, relationships, and loyalty were made under false assumptions, and he begins to question whether he can ever truly trust Brooke again, knowing how easily she carried such a monumental secret through years of shared life. As tensions rise, arguments erupt, voices raised in pain rather than malice, and every confrontation feels like a trial where there are no winners, only varying degrees of heartbreak. Hope, desperate for stability, finds herself re-evaluating her own values, wondering whether honesty is always worth the pain it causes, or whether some truths are too destructive to survive, even as she recognizes that the lie robbed her of agency, of the right to know her own story from the start. Deacon's presence in her life becomes a lightning rod for conflict, his attempts to connect met with skepticism from those who fear he will only bring more chaos. Yet his sincerity is undeniable, his regret genuine as he tries to prove that while he cannot reclaim the past, he can still fight for a place in his daughter's future. Ridge's internal struggle reaches a breaking point when he confronts the reality that despite everything, his feelings for Brooke have not simply disappeared, leaving him trapped between love and self-respect, torn between the desire to walk away and the fear of losing the woman who has defined so much of his life. Brooke, sensing she may lose Ridge forever, reflects on every moment she chose fear over truth, finally understanding that the lie was not an act of protection, but a refusal to face consequences, and that realization becomes her greatest punishment as she watches her family suffer because of her silence. The fallout extends beyond the immediate circle, reshaping alliances and reigniting old rivalries as characters take sides. Some seeing Brooke as a victim of circumstance while others see her as the architect of her own downfall, and the atmosphere becomes charged with suspicion, every conversation tinged with the question of what other secrets might still be lurking beneath the surface. Hope's emotional turmoil begins to manifest in unexpected ways. Her once steady optimism shaken as she struggles with feelings of inadequacy and doubt, wondering whether the legacy of her parents' choices will forever define her, and she vows to break the cycle of deception, determined that her future will be built on truth no matter how painful it may be. Deacon, driven by a newfound sense of purpose, commits himself to proving that he can be more than his past mistakes, even as he accepts that forgiveness may never come easily, and his journey becomes one of redemption tempered by humility, knowing that being a father now means respecting Hope's boundaries and earning her trust day by day. Ridge's anger eventually gives way to a quieter, more dangerous form of pain, a deep-seated sorrow rooted in the realization that his life has been shaped by choices made without his consent, and as he distances himself from Brooke, the absence between them speaks louder than any argument, a chasm carved by years of unspoken truth. Brooke, stripped of excuses, confronts her own reflection and acknowledges that love without honesty is fragile, and though she hopes for forgiveness, she begins to accept that redemption may require letting go, even if it breaks her heart. As the family navigates this new reality, moments of understanding flicker amid the chaos. Brief instances where empathy softens anger and the possibility of healing emerges, but those moments are fleeting, overshadowed by the enormity of what has been lost and the uncertainty of what lies ahead. The secret's exposure becomes a defining chapter in their lives, a turning point that forces each person to confront who they are when stripped of illusions, and while some relationships fracture beyond repair, others evolve, reshaped by honesty and hard-earned growth. In the end, the legacy of Brooke's confession is not just the destruction it causes, but the uncomfortable clarity it brings, revealing the strength and fragility of love, the consequences of fear, and the undeniable truth that secrets kept in the name of protection often inflict the deepest wounds, leaving everyone to grapple with the reality that healing, if it comes at all, will be a long and painful journey marked by forgiveness, accountability, and the courage to face the truth no matter how devastating it may be. Even as time moves forward, the shadow of the revelation refuses to fade, lingering in quiet moments and unguarded glances, because a truth of this magnitude reshapes not only relationships, but the way every character understands their own past. And for Ridge, the ache becomes most profound in solitude, when anger no longer shields him, and he is left alone with the realization that the life he believed he was building was never fully his to define. He begins to recognize how deeply he invested himself in Hope's life, how fiercely he defended her, guided her, and believed in her future, and while none of that love was false, the context surrounding it now feels unbearably distorted, leaving him to question whether his role was that of a father figure by choice or by manipulation. Brooke watches this distance grow with devastating clarity, understanding that trust once broken does not simply return through tears or apologies, and she carries the weight of knowing that no matter how pure her intentions may have felt at the time, the damage is real, permanent, and carved into the emotional foundation of everyone she loves. Hope, caught between the collapse of her parents' world and the emergence of a new one she never asked for, starts to realize that healing cannot come from choosing sides, but from claiming her own voice, and she begins to speak more openly about her pain, forcing those around her to confront the consequences of their choices without shielding themselves behind excuses or blame. Her resolve quietly shifts the dynamic, reminding both Brooke and Deacon that while the secret defined her past, it will not dictate her future unless she allows it to. And this newfound strength becomes both a source of hope and a mirror reflecting their failures. Deacon, deeply aware that redemption is not owed but earned, remains patient, resisting the urge to demand a place in Hope's life, and instead offering consistency, honesty, and accountability, determined to prove that even a man shaped by mistakes can grow when faced with the truth of what he has lost. Ridge, observing this transformation from a distance, feels a complex mix of resentment and reluctant respect, realizing that while Deacon did not cause the lie, he is now forced to live with its consequences just as deeply, and this realization complicates Ridge's anger, turning it inward as much as outward. Brooke's journey becomes one of quiet reckoning, stripped of dramatic gestures and replaced with painful self-awareness, as she learns that forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be the result of sustained honesty rather than desperate pleas, and she commits herself to transparency in a way she never allowed before, even when it costs her comfort or approval. The family as a whole slowly adjusts to a new equilibrium, one built not on erased pain, but on acknowledgement, where conversations are cautious and emotions raw, yet real, and though the scars remain visible, there is a growing understanding that denial can no longer be the glue holding them together. Ridge eventually confronts the truth he has been avoiding, that walking away may protect his pride, but not necessarily his heart, and while reconciliation feels impossibly distant, the door to dialogue begins to crack open, fragile and uncertain, held together by the shared recognition that love, even when wounded, does not vanish overnight. The legacy of the 30-year secret settles into the fabric of their lives as a permanent reminder of what fear can destroy and what honesty, however late, can still attempt to rebuild. And while no one emerges unscathed, each character is irrevocably changed, forced to grow in ways they never anticipated. In this new reality, the past can no longer be rewritten, but the future remains unwritten, hanging delicately between forgiveness and consequence, and as the echoes of Brooke's confession continue to reverberate, one truth stands above all others. Secrets may shape lives in silence, but it is only in their exposure that true reckoning and the possibility of genuine healing can finally begin.